Bob McKinnon, welcome to the CIO Master Series.
Great to be here.
With more than 36 years of financial and senior management experience and having held senior positions with Lendlease Corporation, MLC Group, State Street Australia and 6 years as the Commonwealth Bank's CIO, you're one of the most experienced and well-respected technology executives in Australia. You're now the Group Executive of Technology at Westpac Bank, presiding over the technology strategy and budget of one of Australia's largest corporations. What made you move from your most recent role as the Joint Managing Director of Multiplex Limited to Westpac?
I think to answer that you have to understand probably what motivates me, and I know as we go through these discussions we're going to talk about what's a fairly unique career that I have had. Probably the one thing that's common throughout that career, from my point of view, is a real desire to make a difference, and a real desire to challenge myself to do different things, and a real desire to make sure that I'm adding value wherever I am. And I think if you then look at the circumstances around Multiplex, and it's fairly easy to see why the time was right for me to move on. I joined Multiplex in 2006, just after they'd announced that they were about to lose about $500 million on the Wembley project, and at that point it was a company with a young chief executive, a lot of challenges, to the point where there was the organisation going to survive or not through these challenges. We had breaches of banking covenants. We clearly had cash flow challenges. We had strategic challenges, and that was a great opportunity for me. I really loved that. But 2.5 years on, or near to 2.5 years on, the company had been sold. Wembley had been open. We'd had the FA Cup final there. Many of the strategic challenges were behind the organisation, and along had come Brookfield and taken the company over. In that time frame, I'd moved from CFO to Joint Managing Director, and at that point I felt that I'd done my job. I'd seen through what I'd undertaken to do for the board. It had worked out in a different way than perhaps we'd planned 2 years earlier, but I felt at that stage it was time for me to move on, and I actually set out to go on the non-executive director circuit and to step back from a full-time executive career, and I'd actually taken the step to do that and left Multiplex when along came a phone call from Gail Kelly. Gail had recently sort of landed at Westpac and had got her head around what she needed to do and the team that she felt she wanted and the challenges that she had ahead of us and ahead of her, and from a technology point of view reached out and asked me to join up and come on board and help her through the technology challenges of the merger with St George and a multi-brand business model and a whole lot of other really, really exciting and different things. So I think it was a pretty obvious time to move on, and then a great challenge to pick up, and somewhere where I really thought I could add a lot of value.
Most CIOs and senior technology executives come from a pure technology background, but you started out as a chartered accountant. How did your training as a chartered accountant help you to forge a career in technology?
It was probably more my training at Lendlease than my pure training as a chartered accountant. It was I built a career at Lendlease from starting in the finance ranks and worked my way through to be the CFO of Lendlease by the time I was 35, and then moved on into general management. So I'd done a lot of different things at Lendlease. I'd worked right across the organisation, from property to financial services, in corporate roles. I'd done a lot of Mr. Fix-It jobs. I'd done a lot of acquisitions, a lot of project work. I had a good understanding of what project management, the disciplines around those things were. Lendlease was a great culture in terms of quality people, teamwork, all of those really great things that I learned in Lendlease. I think gave me the flexibility as an individual to want to challenge myself and to want to do different things. So certainly my chartered accounting background gave me a discipline from a commercial point of view. But I think the Lendlease background gave me the leadership and other training that I needed in order to be so flexible and versatile in what I was doing.
What were some of the key career opportunities and achievements that helped you to rise to such a senior position?
I started out at Civil and Civic and hadn't been there very long when my boss was exited, so I got a field promotion, and that that gave me my first opportunity to shine, and then after I got lots of other opportunities to do new and exciting things. In the 80s, Lendlease was a very dynamic place to work, so there was a new challenge. Every couple of years there was a new job to do, and I was lucky. I worked hard. The harder I worked, the luckier I got, as they say. But I found myself working with some fantastic people like John Morshell and others, and then really had the chance to be John's CFO when he took over as managing director in 1988. And at that stage, I wasn't particularly old. I was only in my mid-30s, so that was a great career opportunity. And I think something that really challenged me to think about what my potential was. I think prior to that, I'd decided that being a public company CFO was a great long-term career ambition. All of a sudden, I had to challenge myself to do some different things. Then, with the merger of MLC and Capita, I got the opportunity to move into financial services, initially as CFO at MLC, and to learn all about a totally different industry. And then in 1995, the opportunity to move into the Chief General Manager role at MLC and get a really good taste of what it was like to run a business and drive change at a General Manager, CEO type level through the organisation. So it sort of started there, and lots of other challenges after that.
When you were starting out in your career, what were your aspirations and what gave you the drive to succeed?
I always wanted to succeed in my career as an accountant, and I found that I'd done most of the things that I wanted to do in that sense by the time I was in my mid-30s. So now some 20 odd years ago. So not even halfway through my career in many respects.
Your career has placed you front and centre of the technology revolution, and you've seen some incredible changes in the way that technology has influenced corporate strategy. How has technology management and leadership, especially within a corporate structure, changed along the way?
I think the big focus on outsourcing in the 90s has had some really interesting challenges for the management of technology through the last 10 or 15 years. I think most people would clearly acknowledge that when a lot of the big outsourcing contracts were written, the one thing that the organisations didn't do was really get their head around what it was going to take to then manage those contracts into the future. So amongst many things that I've seen change since 2000 as I got involved is the realisation that disciplined vendor management is really important. And now you're starting to see organisations much more focused on how they manage those contracts, much more thoughtful about the way the contracts are structured, the length of the term of those contracts. So that's certainly one big change. I think the other change has been around leadership. And I think also people are now much more cognizant of the fact that whether you're working in technology or in any other part of the organisation, you've got teams of people to lead. And we need to develop leaders, we need to develop our people right throughout the organisation. So a lot greater focus on developing leaders in technology rather than people who are just technical experts, and a lot more focus on how that technology is managed.
CEOs are usually drawn from a finance, sales or operations background, but rarely from information technology. Your career, however, is proof that CEOs can also be drawn from a technology background. Do you see more CEOs being drawn from the ranks of the CIOs in the future?
It's an interesting question. I'm sure if you asked Ralph Norris, he'd have an interesting answer to that, because Ralph, as the chief of CBA, comes from a technology background. So we do in Australian business have one very prominent example where someone with a technology background is leading a major corporation. But you're right. I think technologists in the past haven't necessarily had the drive or the leadership training that's allowed them to go on and run businesses. Probably a lack of commercial opportunity, and has been probably as big an issue. But I certainly see in the future that there'll be plenty of opportunities for technologists to run businesses.
How important is it for senior IT executives to have major project experience before they take on a Chief Information Officer's role?
It's one thing to be able to get the strategy right, but at the end of the day, good strategy and a good roadmap's important, but ultimately execution is everything. And whether you've had that execution experience in a project or whether you've had it in some other way, I think experience in the line, experience taking accountability for delivery is fundamentally important to anybody who's taking on such an important strategic role in an organisation that not only needs to get the strategy right, needs to make sure it gets delivered.
Obviously, the technology investment at Westpac is substantial. How do you go about constructing your business case to secure investment in infrastructure?
If you start from the basis of, if I do nothing, what will the consequences be? And you paint the picture of the do nothing scenario for long enough, then you can actually demonstrate to people the value of investing and continuing to maintain the currency of their infrastructure. Because when you don't do that, then the consequences ultimately tend to be somewhat dire, and at worst case will certainly hold you back from progressing as an organisation.
What are some of the technology innovations that are improving or will improve a company's ability to reach their business goals and maintain their competitive advantage?
For banks, the ability to process transactions, the ability to virtualise our environments, to efficiently store our data, all of those things are quite critical to us remaining competitive. And when we look at some of the technology that we're currently seeing from Cisco, VMware and EMC, then we're really excited by that. I think the sight of, or the foresight of John Chambers and his team at Cisco, and the way that they're really challenging the mid-range model and really finding a way to start to turn mid-range into something that's challenging the mainframe. The way they're moving the network and the compute together is really great technology, and we're quite excited by that.
Finally, do you see that technology will change the way that a bank does business? Or will banks set the agenda and simply demand differing technology from vendors to suit an evolving business model?
They ultimately might, but frankly I think that's it's unlikely. In my experience, banks have tended to be followers of technology rather than necessarily innovators. They'll often find an innovative way to use existing technology, and that's important. So finding an innovative way to use the iPad is important. But at the end of the day, they tend to use what's there. They tend to use the technology that's invented by others, often for other reasons, and then find a great way to deploy it to their advantage in the financial services business.